Some families of the women murdered by serial killer Robert Pickton demand police continue to keep all evidence related to their loved ones' cases. Plus,
over 75 land defenders were arbitrarily arrested and detained solely for exercising their Indigenous rights.
Amnesty International says it's found evidence police and private security violated people's human rights during protests on Wet'suwet'en land. And
we certainly wouldn't want another family to go through this.
the mother of a Kelowna man who died in hospital is now suing doctors and the health authority, what she claims happened to him.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Do not dump the evidence. That is the message from some families of the women murdered by serial killer Robert Pickton to the RCMP. They want all evidence in their loved ones' cases to continue to be preserved. But as Leanne Young explains, Mounties say the evidence has been, quote, captured and won't affect future prosecutions. A warning some listeners and viewers may find details disturbing.
There's already no justice in Tanya's case because it's a state case.
Lorelei Williams was only 16 years old when her cousin Tanya Hollick went missing from Vancouver's downtown east side.
This has been so traumatizing for me. I never attended the trial for a reason, because I didn't want this trauma.
Her cousin, along with the remains of 32 other women, were found on Robert Pickton's pig farm. That grief dredged up again when Williams says she and other families found out from local advocates only days ago that the evidence might be destroyed. RCMP have been applying to the courts since at least 2020 to dispose of exhibits from the Pickton trial. Evidence like shoes, a pillowcase, sexual aids.
Why, in this case, are they trying to erase the evidence?
Sarah Jean DeVries's mother, who bears the same name, was among those whose remains were found on the farm. She, along with other victims' families and more than 40 groups advocating for missing murdered Indigenous women and girls, want it stopped. They fear the loss of physical evidence could jeopardize future cases.
This latest step by the RCMP to seek disposal of all exhibits, a mere 20 years after the investigation on the farm began, sends the message that the missing and murdered women's cases are closed, despite the majority of them being unsolved.
Pickton was found guilty in 2007 of 6 counts of second-degree murder in the deaths of 6 women. 20 additional first-degree murder charges against him were stayed because he was already serving the maximum sentence. That controversial decision was announced by the Attorney General at the time, Wally Opal. He later led the inquiry into the Pickton case, which found egregious police errors.
At some stage, you have to rely on the RCMP. All these years have gone by, and there hasn't been any other evidence pointing to any other offender. So I understand what they're trying to do here.
Opal says it's common for evidence to be eventually destroyed, especially when it seems unlikely to be used anytime soon in court. But still, victims' families like DeVries believe Pickton didn't act alone.
Every single person who brought a woman to that farm, anyone who was working on that farm, should be held accountable.
RCMP declined an interview, only sending a statement saying in part, all possible evidence has been captured and retained. The disposal of property would not affect any future prosecution. For these families, though, it's little reassurance after decades of broken trust. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
A crash near the Lionsgate Bridge tonight has halted traffic in both directions on and near that span. It happened in the Stanley Park Causeway earlier today. Emergency crews have been on scene. Vancouver fire crews say they were working to free a trapped person from the car on its side. Emergency Health Services tells CBC News 2 people were taken to hospital, 1 in critical condition, 1 stable. Again, the Lionsgate Bridge is closed in both directions. We'll bring you any updates as they come in. Amnesty International has released a new report on the protests on Wet'suwet'en land in BC. It says it found evidence police and private security forces violated the human rights of land defenders, claims the RCMP categorically denies. As Michelle Gassoub explains, the human rights group is now calling for police to leave the territory immediately.
Hey, come on, you're under arrest.
Get your hands off me!
You're under arrest.
For 3 years, Wet'suwet'en land defenders have been going up against police and private security contractors, trying to prevent construction of the Coastal GasLink pipeline. Now, as the project wraps up, a new report tabled by Amnesty International describes the tactics used against them, saying their human rights were violated as police cracked down during 4 separate raids.
During these raids, the RCMP were equipped with semi-automatic weapons, helicopters, and dog units. Over 75 land defenders were arbitrarily arrested and detained solely for exercising their Indigenous rights.
The report is a result of a spring 2023 research mission, where Amnesty says it heard reports RCMP used aggressive intimidation and surveillance tactics and employed disproportionate force.
The unlawful surveillance and the criminalization of Wet'suwet'en land defenders were part of a concerted effort to remove them from their ancestral territory in order to allow the pipeline construction to proceed.
RCMP declined a request for an interview, but said arrests and enforcement actions are only undertaken once all other avenues to resolve the conflict have been exhausted. The rights of everyone involved, whether arrested or not, have been fully respected throughout these events. But those on the ground say that's not been their experience.
I don't know how many of you have been arrested and put in dog cages to be brought to jail, then put in front of judges in your underclothes. That's not what Canada is.
Amnesty is now calling for an immediate halt to construction and the withdrawal of police and private security forces from Wet'suwet'en territory.
This should never be normal anywhere, especially when Canada says we are such a free and democratic country and aren't we great? Come to our country, look how we treat our people.
Amnesty also met with officials from Coastal GasLink who say they operate within international human rights standards. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
More transit is coming for commuters in Surrey and Delta. A brand new ride will hit the streets starting January 2nd. The R6 is Metro Vancouver's latest rapid bus route. It will run from Scott Road Station in Surrey down Scott Road until 72nd Avenue, then turn east before finishing its route at Newton Exchange. The new route will have stretch buses, enclosed shelters, and real-time bus arrival signs. TransLink says it's the biggest transit expansion since 2020. It's rare that a public hearing for a new housing project takes more than a day or two. But in the district of North Vancouver, they will be entering a 4th day of discussion this week. It concerns a potential social housing project. And as Justin McElroy explains, why some residents aren't thrilled.
The district of North Vancouver. It has plenty of mountains, it's not the city of North Vancouver, and it has a public hearing that has been going on for a long time.
How come West Vancouver doesn't have anything like this? Everything comes to North Vancouver, but West Vancouver has 0.
That is just one person from the 3-day-long public hearing that's been happening in the district over a supportive housing site. It is proposed at the busy intersection of East Keith and Mountain Highway on a plot of land owned by the district. Now, the district says it would provide 65 studio apartment units and would be for people on the North Shore who are either homeless or at risk of becoming so. Now, part of the backlash stems from another supportive housing site on the North Shore that's had a fair amount of media attention. That's down at a former travel lodge, a facility run by the same society that would operate the Keith Road complex, Luma. But part of the backlash is similar to what we've seen at proposals for social housing across the region. Here's a sample compiled from just one of the 10 hours worth of the public hearing so far.
The location for this proposal is clearly not a good fit for the community.
Contribute to crime, drug use, garbage, parking, verbal abuse.
Proximity of this project to parklands, schools, daycares, and cannabis and liquor retailers is an added concern.
We are concerned about the risk this project poses on our safety, crime in the neighborhood, and our property values.
And the public hearing isn't even over yet. After 3 days, there are still more people waiting to speak. It might not be decided on until next year. But despite the large amount of backlash, it still might pass, in part because politicians in North Vancouver feel it's important to provide a greater diversity of housing. Here is a chart. It shows all of the supportive and emergency shelter spots for the homeless in Metro Vancouver. Now, the city of Vancouver itself has nearly 9,000 of those spaces, but the North Vancouvers, both the city and district combined, has just 120. Now, there are all sorts of reasons why the downtown east side has such a large portion of the region's most vulnerable people, but one of them is just how difficult it is to build supportive housing anywhere else. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
As the holidays rev up, BC health officials are warning you it's also peak time for colds, flu, and COVID. And as Zara Premji tells us, the province says it is not too late for you to get vaccinated.
Not yet, but I will. This will be the first time I ever got it.
Glenn Finday says pre-COVID-19, a flu shot meant nothing to him. But as he ages and the reality of fast-spreading illness has kicked in over the years, he'll be lining up for that vaccine soon enough.
As I see some friends of mine that get the flu, and they get really, really sick, So, and I'm old, so.
He's one of the thousands Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry is hopeful will sign up for the shot, and soon.
Now is the time where we can take preventive measures to try and stop that peak. You do this for yourself, for your friends, your family, your teammates, and for our community.
She says while COVID-19 tends to remain top of mind, it's cases of the flu and RSV that are both on the rise, while the rate of COVID-19 hospitalizations and deaths have actually been decreasing since October.
RSV is increasingly causing illness, especially in children.
The province says at least 1.4 million British Columbians have received a flu shot as of Sunday, but there's still a heavy weight on the healthcare system because of respiratory illness.
A continued period in the course of a week of 10,000 patients in our public healthcare system.
Not everyone, though, is eager to roll up their sleeves.
I grew up in one of those families where it's like, eat dirt and that's how you build your immune system,
But this doctor says with illness on the rise, some tough decisions might need to be made for the holidays.
Uncle John coming in from Toronto, standing at the door, coughing, saying that he feels better now that he's taken something for it. I think we really need to use Zoom for Uncle John again this year.
And a reminder to go back to the basics.
It's not hard to cover your cough or to stay home if you're sick, and encourage us all to think about doing that.
Henry says if you are hit with COVID-19 or the flu, delay your holiday gatherings, postpone the fun, and contain the illness. Zara Premji, CBC News, Vancouver.
The National Council of Canadian Muslims is speaking out about an incident in Victoria last week that they are calling anti-Arab and Islamophobic. During a pro-Palestinian rally at the BC legislature, a driver swerved toward a protester. They claim he yelled at an Arab man to, quote, go back to Jordan. A spokesperson for the National Council says confrontations like that are becoming all too common. He wants the government and police to do more to stop them.
We ask that the city to bolster security around protests and police to investigate this heinous attack on a student from our community here in British Columbia for what it clearly is, a hate-motivated crime. We also ask the city and the province to take action in protecting those exercising their right to peacefully protest.
Victoria Police say they're still looking into what happened and they have yet to recommend any charges. In the wake of the ongoing violence in the Middle East, faith groups across Metro Vancouver gathered together this weekend with a collective call for peace. As Janella Hamilton explains, some spiritual leaders say uniting as one is critical amid the steep and widespread rise of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia.
Uniting in the face of unimaginable devastation and disheartening division. Dozens of people from the Muslim, Jewish, and Christian faiths gathering under one roof Sunday with one common goal.
Regardless of our religious background, regardless of our teachings, we must come together as one and promote love for all, hatred for none, and call for a ceasefire in the Middle East where innocent people are losing their lives on a daily basis.
Rabbi Laura Duhan Kaplan says the message of global peace and hope in times of darkness is especially significant this week as thousands of people mark Hanukkah.
We're seeing violence, harassment, bullying, vandalism, other kinds of hate crimes. And I think it is very, very important for spiritual leaders and religious leaders in Canada to stand together.
BC's Human Rights Commissioner says the violence overseas has sparked a surge of discrimination toward Jewish and Muslim people in this province. Vancouver police alone have reported 18 hate incidents aimed at the Jewish community, while the National Council of Canadian Muslims says the past few months have been the worst in decades for Islamophobia.
We know that Hamas did an unfortunate act which goes against the teaching of Islam. That goes without saying, but the action that is being taken on afterwards is the cause of concern.
Sunday's gathering at the Beitar Rahman Mosque in Delta began with prayers led by each faith leader.
In times of distress, let us respond.
Followed by a panel discussion where community members were given a platform to ask questions and share their concerns.
There's a lot of heartache seeing what's going on in the Middle East. So together, as we come together, shake our hands, give hugs, and I think come to some sort of not conclusion, but ideas on how we can help our community through this crisis.
Batty says this event is one of many happening in cities across Canada. He hopes by uniting various faith groups as the war drags on, it will stem the tide of polarization and serve as a small step toward the ultimate hope of peace in the Middle East. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Delta.
British Columbia has a tumultuous relationship with old-growth forests. Environmentalists argue they're essential to protecting our province's biodiversity and endangered ecosystems. Those in the logging industry say they depend on lumber for economic stability. Now, a CBC News investigation has uncovered a practice that is allowing old-growth forests to be cut right next to sensitive wildlife areas. It's happening by way of a practice called co-location, happening in the Klanawa Valley on Vancouver Island, about halfway between Clayoquot Sound and Fairy Creek. Coastal rainforests are home to some of the largest trees in the country that experts warn are in danger of disappearing forever. CBC senior reporter Tara Carman led this investigation, and she joins us now. Tara, you visited the valley in October and saw the divide between protected forest and logging area firsthand. What is co-location?
Well, essentially, Dan, it's satisfying two forestry regulations with the same patch of trees. So here's the thing. When an area is logged, companies have to leave a small amount of trees standing for wildlife. So that makes sense if you picture a vole, for example, running across a clear cut being chased by a hawk. So these wildlife retention trees give it a place to hide. What co-location means is those trees that they have to save being placed in an area that's already protected, such as wildlife habitat. Will O'Connell discovered this when he found a piece of orange tape indicating a falling boundary, the edge of an area authorized to be cut about 50 meters into the protected area.
The falling company has been ordered by the government to leave an island of old-growth trees when they log a whole cut block so that there will still be a place for migratory birds and other animals to go. And because they've been ordered to leave this island, they've said, well, let's pretend that we're going to go log the wildlife habitat, and then we can say, oh, look, that's our island. So right now we're standing in the wildlife habitat, and this whole island of forest around us represents an island of old-growth trees that should have been protected up in the cut block behind us, but instead has been logged.
Tara, this sounds like a loophole. So is co-location legal?
Not only is it legal, but it's actually encouraged by the government as a way to maximize timber harvests. But as a few experts pointed out, we're supposed to have moved beyond the era when this was our primary goal. So in 2020, a landmark report from BC's Old Growth Strategic Review said we are at a crisis point in this province for biodiversity, and we need a new approach that puts ecological health front and center. And old growth forests are key to this because they've been growing for centuries. It's wet on the coast, so they've never burned. And this means that they're home to a huge variety of plants and animals. Independent ecologist Karen Price, who was part of the BC government's advisory panel on old growth, called co-location double counting and a relic of a bygone era. She said the government could prove it's truly committed to a new direction by ending these kinds of practices.
They can say, okay, we are no longer going to co-locate because we recognize that co-locating is damaging to ecosystems. It's damaging to the functions that we want these ecosystems to perform. So now that we know all that, we want to see evidence on the ground that the government is following through with the idea to shift the paradigm.
Karen also pointed out that these are some of the biggest carbon stores in the country because they've been storing it for centuries. So if they're cut, not only do they release a lot of carbon into the atmosphere, but the newly clear-cut ground loses its ability to hold water and dries out, which means floods and fires, all the hallmarks of climate change that BC is becoming famous for, even more likely. And it affects wildlife too. And that is simply becomes unprotected in a patchwork of forest in a barren landscape of cuts.
Tara, what does the company responsible for the logging have to say about this?
So the company doing the log-in is called Sawakin, and that company is 2/3 owned by Western Forest Products, which has held the license to log in this area since 2006, and 1/3 owned by the Huu-ay Nation, whose traditional territory it is. I spoke with the Sawakin board chair, Shauna McConnell, who's also vice president of Indigenous Partnerships for Western Forest Products. She emphasized that 3/4 of the old-growth forest in this area is protected, and that the company doesn't cut the biggest and tallest trees. I also spoke with Elder M. Chaik, who was a former chief counselor of the Huu-ay. He said his people watched for decades as companies profited from selling the timber and the fish from their land, and they wanted to say at the management table in how that process worked so their values could inform it. He said forestry is central to the economy of his community, and he had a clear message for those who question his people's right to manage their own land.
Respect our decision. Honor and respect it with the utmost sincerity, that you're not interfering, that you're not trying to control my life. You're not trying to control how I should live. I've had that for 150 years. I don't need it anymore.
The Ministry of Forests wouldn't give us an interview. They told me they'd prefer to respond to written questions. They said co-location wasn't an issue and that the same patch of forest can serve more than one purpose, and that they're working with communities, industry, and scientists to come up with long-term land use plans. But while they do that, Dan, there is likely to be more old-growth logging in the Klanawa Valley.
CBC reporter, senior reporter Tara Carman, thanks very much. Darius Madavi joins us with a first look at the weather, and you've survived your first snowfall in Metro Vancouver. How'd it go?
Oh, it wasn't too bad. No, it was
wonderful.
It was yeah, I don't know. Yeah. You made it sound very dramatic. It wasn't that bad. Everybody, the drivers seemed to be okay.
Have you driven a lot when it snows here?
No.
That's
no,
a
not
story
too
for
much.
another day.
But the drivers didn't seem too bad. I don't know.
The two?
I don't know, Dan.
Yeah.
We'll wait and see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds
I
good.
think most people probably stayed home. Fortunately, no more snow on the way. Those strange winds that were blowing from the east and from the north, bringing that mountain and interior cool air that brought us the snow, are not coming. So far, it seems, at least this week. So we're going to keep seeing that the normal westerly flow bringing warm air, meaning we're going to just see rain for the most part. Here you can see our ridge of high pressure break down over the next 2 days. So by Wednesday, that is no longer protecting us from the storms that are currently hitting the north coast of Vancouver, or of BC, sorry. And then you can see here that low pressure system swoop in. So if we add precipitation on top, you can watch over the next 24 hours, plenty of moisture for the north coast and a little bit for the central coast possible. And then it's not until Wednesday that is able to break that ridge down and make its way down into the rest of Vancouver and really the entire south coast, including pushing into the interior as some flurries. So expect a little bit of rain there. If we look at our accumulation, you can see plenty of snow on the way. But actually, let's save this for later this hour. Let's talk about tonight, because we do have a meteor shower happening as we get into this week, peaking on Wednesday. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But tonight and tomorrow, probably your best chance to see it, because we're looking partly cloudy, whereas Wednesday night looks quite cloudy. So we'll talk more about this later this hour.
Sounds good. Thanks, Doris.
Thanks, Dan.
Dozens of former Vancouver Park Board commissioners are speaking out to save the board. This comes after Mayor Ken Sim announced a plan to remove the elected body, calling it a, quote, broken system. Our Liam Britton is at a Park Board meeting tonight. Liam, first of all, what's expected to happen there?
Well, Dan, this is the first Park Board meeting since Mayor Ken Sim announced his intentions to end that elected body. And in some ways, a bit of a different board. 3 of the 6 ABC commissioners have left Mayor Ken Sim's party and are now sitting in opposition. Now, I texted one of the former ABC commissioners, Brendan Bastiavansky, about what is happening tonight. Last week he was saying that the commissioners would retake their oaths, that they would ask the province to write a letter to keep the Park Board in place. And I asked him if that's still the case, and he texted back a thumbs up. So I assume that means that's what's on the agenda. And also, as you mentioned, that there are a number of former Park Board commissioners speaking out in favor of the body. We've seen at least a half dozen here already, including former Commissioner John Coupar.
Well, I think all of us that have served see the value in the Vancouver Park Board and the long history. Since 1890, we've had an elected board. And this decision has been made without a mandate. And in fact, the opposite was told residents in the last election. So I think commissioners see that and are very concerned.
Now, 27 ex-commissioners have signed on to this effort to keep the body, including citing these concerns about the democratic process of it, asking Mayor Ken Sim to reverse course on this decision.
Liam, what happens next in this saga, if we can call it that?
Yeah. So will the Park Board be put out to pasture? Mayor Ken Sim says it's a bad structure and it's leading to worse parks and recreation in the city, and the Parks Board basically says the complete opposite to that. So right now we're expecting that they will have their motion. It might be dueling letters here. On Wednesday, City Council will vote on a motion to ask the province to amend the Vancouver Charter. That's the legislation that makes Vancouver Vancouver essentially, and requires a Park Board. Now, the province has said that this is a decision for City Council to take, but in saying that, they also haven't said if any kind of preconditions or, importantly, timeline come along with Council making that decision. So Wednesday, an important day for city politics there, Dan.
The CBC's Liam Britton outside the Vancouver Park Board office. Liam, thank you. The mother of a 36-year-old Kelowna man who died in hospital 2 years ago has now filed a medical malpractice lawsuit against doctors and the health authority. As Brady Strachan reports, the lawsuit claims the man was left unchecked for several hours and allegedly died because of negligence.
Superman was always his favorite superhero.
For Allison Peace, the grief she feels over the loss of her son Michael is relentless. Michael Peace died 2 years ago this week in hospital. A devastating tragedy, she says, was due to negligence by staff at Vernon Jubilee Hospital.
We certainly wouldn't want another family to go through this. It's absolutely the worst agony I think a parent could possibly endure.
Michael Peace was a father of 2 young children and held a steady job in construction. His family says Michael had a long history of depression and addiction, but in 2021, he was seeing a therapist and attending Narcotics Anonymous meetings.
And he was doing really well. And then he had a relapse, and that's when he ended up being taken to the hospital.
Michael was admitted to the hospital suffering an overdose. Allison says initially she was shocked, but then hopeful he could get the help he needed.
I was relieved that he was being held under the Mental Health Act because I thought, well, at least he can't just walk away, and we thought, okay, maybe he's finally going to get proper treatment.
That hope was short-lived. Allison says she got a call from the hospital in the middle of the night. Michael's condition had worsened, and he was in a coma.
And I screamed and said, what are you talking about?
Michael was transported to Kelowna General Hospital, but his condition continued to worsen, and the following day he died. Now, after 2 years of searching for answers, Allison Peace has filed a medical malpractice lawsuit against 4 physicians and the Interior Health Authority. In the lawsuit, Peace claims her son's death was caused or contributed to by the negligence of staff at the hospital. The lawsuit alleges a doctor prescribed Michael Peace Narcan or naloxone to reverse the effects of opioids, but the drug was not given to him. And the civil suit also claims a doctor ordered Michael Peace be checked on every 15 minutes, But nursing staff allegedly never checked on Peace for a period of about 6.5 hours until he was discovered unresponsive, having choked on his own vomit.
It should never have happened.
The allegations have not been proven in court, and the defendants have not yet filed a legal response. In a statement, Interior Health says it's sorry for the family's loss, but it says it can't comment on the matter while it's before the courts. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
Going home for the holidays means a lot to many people. Delicious meals, home videos, familiar fun. But managing family dynamics can be draining. We'll have some tips on how to handle potential stress right after the break. And thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. In the Kootenays, a Cranbrook woman claims she has been denied housing because of a service animal. And as our Corey Bullock is finding out, lawyers say that is a violation of BC's Tenancy Act.
For years, Chantel Briggs has been dreaming of getting a service dog. She was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder and schizophrenic affective disorder when she was a teenager.
It's hard because I'll disassociate. And when I'm disassociated, I know that what I'm seeing isn't real, but I don't know what is real. And that's when the service dog would have came in.
She lives in Cranbrook in temporary housing, and in September she learned she had been accepted for permanent housing through Akintenham Housing Society. She was excited to sign the paperwork and get the keys until
I mentioned that I'm on the wait list for a service dog for complex PTSD, and they informed me that I would have to find housing elsewhere.
But as this tenant advocate explains, it's against the rules for the Housing Society to deny her housing because of a service animal.
The Residential Tenancy Act specifically states that landlords cannot put restrictions on pets if they are service animals.
He says it's also an infringement on human rights.
So specifically denying someone housing because of a disability is a pretty clear infringement of the Human Rights Code and discriminatory.
Akintenham Housing Society sent a letter to CBC News explaining it could not comment on the matter, stating, quote, "We are unable to provide any comments or statements to the press regarding specific tenant or applicant matters." Patterson says it's tough to pursue legal action in this type of situation because no actual tenancy was formed.
Oftentimes for folks who are desperately looking for housing, doesn't necessarily make sense to jump right away into litigation if that litigation isn't going to get you what you need immediately, which is that housing.
And now Briggs is stuck wondering where she will live with just 6 months left on her current contract.
So I'm nervous, especially because housing doesn't come up fast enough. There's very limited housing in Cranbrook.
For now, she is thankful to have a roof over her head, hoping she won't have to choose between a home and a service dog. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
The federal government has unveiled a new $13 billion dental care plan to help Canadians in low-income households. As Marina von Stackelberg reports, the NDP leader claims his party forced the Liberals to take that step as part of their confidence and supply agreement.
Nice to see you.
This spring, low-income seniors will be able to visit the dentist for free. If they don't already have private health coverage, and make less than $90,000 a year. Services like cleanings, fillings, root canals, and dentures will all be covered.
I was talking with a group of seniors who said to me, Mark, this isn't really going to happen. I've had the same dentures for decades, literally, and I don't have the money to replace them. And when I said, no, this is real, it's going to happen.
The dental plan will be phased in. Applications will first open this month to older seniors, aged 87 and up. By May, those 65 and older can apply. In June, the coverage will expand to people with disabilities and anyone under 18 years old. The goal is to get all low and middle income Canadians free dental care by 2025. The cost? $13 billion, a bill the health minister says is a worthy investment.
When I'm talking to oral health care professionals who are devastated by the fact that they're seeing people who, because they don't have access to care, wait until that becomes an enormous crisis in their health and they go into a hospital, the cost of that care is huge.
This plan, part of a deal between the Liberals and the NDP. The New Democrats support the Liberal minority government on key votes in return for programs like this one.
By working in cooperative partnership with our Liberal colleagues, New Democrats have helped secure dental care for 9 million Canadians. It's no exaggeration to say that this is the biggest expansion of public health care in Canada in many generations.
What's still not clear is how dentists will sign up, how much they'll be paid, and whether or not there will be enough of them to meet demand. The Canadian Dental Association says those details will be worked out in the coming months. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
'Tis the holidays, a time when many people return to their family homes to eat, drink, maybe be merry. But from buried animosity toward a sibling to parental disapproval, managing family dynamics during a time meant to be joyful and celebratory can be very tough. For more on why this happens and how to manage it, we're joined by Dr. Jaleh Shaheen. She is a registered psychologist. Doctor, first of all, what are some familiar family tension points during holiday gatherings?
Well, there's quite a few, actually. So the holidays can be a really joyful, exciting time, but it can also be an emotionally very complex period of time for people. And that could be for all different reasons from, some family members may be experiencing a mental illness. There can be a lot of family dynamics. There could even be a history of family trauma, for example, that people are trying to navigate. There could be grief that people experience because they've lost a loved one, or relationships are not in the right place, or there could be a marriage breakdown that people are trying to navigate. There could also be substance use concerns or disordered eating disorders. So there's a lot of different reasons why things, we build up all these expectations around the holidays about having this picture perfect time together. And unfortunately, that's not many people's experience. And so the backdrop of those expectations, that can also compound kind of some of the emotional complexity that people experience.
It's a layered issue for sure. What are some of the general tips that you offer to your patients that come to you with these problems?
Yeah, so if people know, they can reasonably anticipate that they're going to have some tense moments with family. For example, the same family member has been critical or disapproving year after year after year. Chances are that they're not going to suddenly change overnight. And so one of the things that we talk about and we recommend is being really planned and intentional. So if you know that some family members get along really well with each other, seeing if you can seat them together as opposed to kind of putting the people that historically don't get along together, having very specific topics of conversation in mind that are neutral, and staying away from inflammatory type topics. And if an inflammatory topic does come up, maybe gently redirecting the conversation to a more neutral. And if all of that fails, we do say having a plan in place. So I call it the graceful exit plan. If you feel emotionally unsafe, ensuring that you have a plan in place about how do you limit your time, or is there a way that you could gracefully exit the situation, take a breather, come back, or potentially leave earlier. So rather than spending an entire day with family that you don't feel emotionally safe with, maybe you just spend a few hours in the evening. So being really planned about it. But the general rule of thumb is, unfortunately, other people's reactions what they do, what they say, we can't control, but your reaction's the only piece that you can control. Having a plan in place is helpful.
And I have to ask quickly, if you go back to old environments like a childhood home, can bring back all sorts of vivid memories, affect how we act in the present time. Why does that happen?
So we call them memory cues. So generally speaking, our brain can create these cues and memories from different experiences and different environments. And sometimes being back in a childhood home brings up a lot of those old memories and old emotions. And so, for example, if someone has experienced trauma, for example, a lot of those traumatic memories can come up, certain emotional experiences may come up. And so it's very common for people to experience that. And sometimes people will notice that when they're back in a childhood home, some previous dynamics may come up really automatically. So if they have a very kind of child-parent relationship, for example, those same dynamics may come up as soon as they're back in that environment. It's very common. Dr. Jaleh Shaheen, we appreciate your time and your perspective. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Frustration, that's the sentiment for climate activists and scientists at COP28 in Dubai. Why they say the draft agreement is watered down. That's next.
Juan Pablo Silva Perez, you are the new owner of a beautiful home on Monroe Drive. Congratulations.
Honestly, when I got the ticket, I've just kind of always thought about, especially because it's a hospice ticket, you know, always trying to help out a little bit. I went to Canadian Tire, I think it was, one day, and then I just saw the table, and I was like, oh man, and I think the lady already knew me, and she was like, JP, are you gonna buy one? And I was like, yeah, I'll buy one this year. You know, one of those Fridays where you just want to unwind, and I just met up with my friends, and we were being pretty nerdy and playing a board game, and I was the one setting it up, and I put my phone face down, and I was trying to, just hang out with my friends, and I look up at my phone, and I must have had, I don't know, like 60 missed calls, a ton of missed messages, and you know, my stomach dropped, and I just looked at my friend, and I was like, Mark, I think something really bad happened. And
After leaving a message, you can hang up. Hi, Juan. This is Donna Flood, the Executive Director of the Hospice Palliative Care Society. I'm hoping that you can give me a call. I've got some information for you that I think will make your weekend.
I called Sandra from Hospice because she's the one that messaged me, and because I still, you know, I saw my I don't know, I kept telling myself there's a scam, like there's no way that it's my ticket, and I called her, and you know, she started talking, and she was like, hey JP, you won. How does it feel to be the new hospice winner? Like, we're so happy for you. And she's talking, and I broke down on the other side of the phone. You know, I don't know, it was pretty emotional, and she's talking to me, and I didn't answer, obviously, because I'm trying to I couldn't even talk. The moment that I talked, I knew I was going to cry. And she's like, hello, JP, are you there? And all I could say was, I'm happy. And I broke down. And you know what's really funny? There was so many people trying to call me. Like, my whole siblings in Mexico knew before me. People that I didn't know added me on Facebook. They're trying to tell me, like, contractors that I used to work with when I was with the brew house as a general manager were trying to call me. And how long was your phone off? For about an hour and a half. It wasn't even that long. No, and when they called, so when I saw the posting of the video, or when they were calling, it was like maybe 3 minutes after I started playing the board game. So like, there was a good hour and 20 minutes where people were trying to get a hold of me, and I was just, I don't know, I was just hanging out with a friend playing a board game.
With the UN Climate Summit set to wrap up tomorrow, there is some dissension among participants. Many are disappointed with the draft agreement. Critics have panned it, claiming it's watered down. Susan Ormiston looks at the frustration among those who have long called for a plan to phase out fossil fuels.
Progress at COP28 to reach a successful agreement before the deadline has been derailed. Hours before that deadline, there was a new draft of the agreement, which didn't go far enough for people who wanted a strong statement on curtailing fossil fuels. The document, which was hailed as a huge step forward by the COP presidency, says countries could take actions, including reducing both consumption and production of fossil fuels. But many were hoping for a much stronger statement, including the words phase out or phase down fossil fuels. They're calling this draft weak and unacceptable.
If we want that historic outcome here at COP28 and we want this process to remain relevant, we need a much stronger articulation of the need to wind down fossil fuels and bring up clean energy.
It's going to be a long night with negotiators poring over the draft to see how and what will be rewritten to make it a unanimous agreement by Tuesday, which is the deadline. But Saudi Arabia and other OPEC countries have already said they reject any mention of phasing out or phasing down fossil fuels. It's now up to the COP presidency to try to save the agreement and come to some consensus on Tuesday. Canada's Environment Minister, who has had a role in trying to find some common ground on the fossil fuel issue here, told us earlier that mentioning fossil fuels in the agreement in some way would be considered a first.
It will be the first time in almost 30 years of climate change negotiations where we address the elephant in the room, our dependencies on fossil fuels. Will the text be perfect on that? I don't think so. But will it signal the fact that there is a global recognition that we need to reduce our dependencies on fossil fuels? Yes.
Tomorrow we expect another draft of the document to see if the UAE can push it over the line and come to a unanimous conclusion to COP28. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Dubai.
There they are. A group of sea lions spotted frolicking in Coal Harbour today. A marine expert explains why they were so close to shore right after this.
Helium is often associated with party balloons, but today it's used in everything from MRI machines to semiconductors to the aerospace industry. In recent years, supply has been tight and prices have been high, leading to a new wave of prospectors hoping to cash in.
Whether it be healthcare or high tech, there is such a shortage that they will come now to the producers and try to contract on the volumes before you've even started producing them.
The push for more Canadian production is being cheered by the Canadian Association of Medical Radiation Technologists. Still, some caution the boom times may not last forever. Energy giants Qatar and Russia are ramping up their own production. This means Canadian producers may have a relatively short window before prices could fall and interest from investors could wane. The Helium Developers Association of Canada says it's trying to move the industry forward as quickly as possible. It's pushing for access to tax measures it said would help spur investment. Paula Duhacek, CBC News, Calgary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for making CBC British Columbia's Food Bank Day a huge success.
We kicked off the holiday season with a day of special programming, festive performances, and a whole lot of generosity from you.
So far, we have raised an incredible amount for food banks across BC, and you can still donate all month long. Let's make the season kind for people in need. Head to cbc.ca/foodbankday. A host of sea lions was frolicking in the waters around downtown Vancouver today. Have a look. Several California sea lions were having some fun in Coal Harbour earlier today. The Vancouver Aquarium says the animals are always looking for new foraging spots in quiet waters.
They trick a lot of people every year. So this time of year, we do get a lot of calls from members of the public that are concerned that animals are entangled or somehow in distress. But it's just a California sea lion, laying on their side, floating along on currents, and putting their front and sometimes hind flippers up in the air just to catch some sun rays to warm up.
The aquarium says California sea lions are seen in large numbers this time of year outside their breeding season. Darius Madavi joins us now. Just before we get to weather, short quiz. Do you know what we call a group of sea lions?
I do. I didn't know there was going to be a quiz. I would joke and say that it would be a sea pride. Because
okay,
lions,
very good. Yeah, very good.
But I think the right answer is when they're on land, it's a colony, and when they're in the water, it's a raft.
Holy moly.
Got it.
2 out of 2.
When they do the group
I knew there was
thing.
a reason we hired you.
Oh, right? I did not know there was going to be a quiz. Now
I.
I'm going to be worried every time I come up here.
No, we're not going to do that each time.
Okay.
Just every weekday. It's okay.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. I think we should talk about the meteor shower that's coming this week. These are called the Geminids. The reason that they're called this is a composite image, actually, from I believe, 2019. And then you can see all these different meteors that came in one night. If we take a look, you can see they're called the Geminids because they seem to be coming from the Gemini constellation, but really this is the trail of a comet that orbits around or a series of comets that revolves around the sun. So when we pass through the trail of that comet, we get to see all these amazing meteors, and you can see no concern. You can go out and watch for the meteor shower. You don't have to worry about being hit by them. They always burn up. Very rarely do they make it past this point. So no worries about going out. The one worry you might have is that it might be a little bit chilly. So tonight in Vancouver, if you were going to go out, it's a little bit chilly, but it's a good time of year to have this happen, or a good phase of the moon. It's a new moon tonight, meaning that it's going to be very dark skies, easy to see. The peak of the meteor shower is on Wednesday, so a little bit farther away, but you might want to try and make it out tonight or tomorrow night because of all the cloud that we have moving in. Tonight is a good chance. Not too much cloud happening. Same thing tomorrow, a little bit cloudier in some parts of the province, but here in Vancouver, you might have a lucky break. But Wednesday, we have a pretty big cloud system moving in that should make it very difficult to see the meteors. But your big worry is probably going to be temperatures tonight because it is going to be quite chilly in many places, but that's not really going to let up anytime soon. Now, if we take a look at our actual weather, you can see we have a wind warning in place for the north coast, and Haida Gwaii. Very high winds there, and an air quality statement here because of a stagnant weather system that's just trapping some of the particulate matter in the air, so be aware of that. Here you can see our winds happening, very high up here as we head into tomorrow, but then making its way down south, bringing high winds here as well on Wednesday morning as that system rolls down. In terms of accumulation, quite a bit of snowfall coming all down the coast and breaking into parts of the interior, but not looking too bad just yet. In terms of our conditions tomorrow, plenty of sun and cloud, not much exciting happening except here on the coast. And again, that wind warning in place. If we zoom into Vancouver, not a very exciting forecast, but pretty typical. We have snowfall coming for the mountains on Wednesday. Sorry about that.
I don't have to apologize.
There we go.
There
Not
it is.
likely to make its way down to Vancouver this time around, but in Vancouver we do have some rain on the way. Bit of a rainy week.
Okay, we'll deal. Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
Jingle bell, jingle bell rocks.
So what's your favorite holiday song? We hit the streets for some impromptu Christmas caroling. Stick around.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
CBC Radio's The Early Edition is holding a contest to find BC's favorite holiday song.
It's in honor of a UK tradition where artists compete to have the number one spot on the charts on Christmas Day. So we asked Vancouverites to tell us, or sing us in some cases, their favorite holiday tunes.
It's beginning to look like Christmas.
Our radio show, The Early Edition, is holding a contest to find the best holiday music. So we're out here today asking people, what's your favorite holiday song?
Deck the Halls is like an absolute classic. Deck the halls with bells of jolly, fa la 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 la.
It's the season to be jolly, fa la 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 la.
Little Saint Nick by the Beach Boys. Yes, I was about to say that. Let's go. Yep, that's it.
Just a little bobsled.
Jingle bell, jingle bell rocks.
Jingle bells swing and jingle.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas. This is cozy. Have yourself a merry little Christmas.
I'm in town working on the Nutcracker, so the entire soundtrack to that. It's
No Mariah Carey for you?
can't say so, no, unfortunately.
All I want for Christmas is you.
Mariah Carey. Mariah Carey, easy. Easy.
All I want for Christmas is you. Okay.
So what's your favorite holiday song? You can vote on the poll online.
Your favorite?
It's from the Miser Brothers Christmas movie, which nobody's ever heard of. If you've heard of it, let me know, because I've asked so many people and only one person's ever heard of it.
Cool.
I'm Mr. White Christmas. And you?
Me? Oh. Song for a Winter's Night, Gordon Lightfoot. The Sarah McLachlan version goes really well with shortbread and a beaker of something very cheerful.
Oh.
Good tune.
Okay.
There you go.
I'll check it out.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
We will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. See you then.